Before we begin, thank you very much to Barricade Did Nothing Wrong for joining the Patreon campaign. I think he did a few things wrong. Do you want the list? Because there's a movie about it. He did some not nice things. But thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you for contributing and keeping the channel going. Hi, it's video number 999. Tomorrow is 1,000 daily videos. Kind of insane. We're actually going to make it. But let's get through today's video first. So, with recent toy reveals, especially the packaging reveals, we can once and for all confirm that the blue bot that we see being assaulted by this Quintesson is actually the new Transformers 1 version of Sentinel Prime. So that's pretty much an obvious. I will admit, because, the blue coloring especially does really kind of set him off. But it's nice to have the confirmation, because it is yet another take on Sentinel Prime. So, in doing this video and researching this, I've experienced all these Sentinels in passing and directly most of the time, but in diving deeper into this, it is amazing, because Sentinel Prime is not a character that really has one defining characteristic to them. Even when you modernize a Starscream, a Bumblebee, a Soundwave, etc., you're generally keeping a little bit of the original elements in there in one way or another, so they still feel like the correct character. Bumblebee in live action and modern might be a lot more of a gun-toting action scene hero than the original, but he still keeps that desire for human connection, which kind of keeps you grounded in the original Bumblebee concept. So things like that. But Sentinel is basically a blank slate of a character where it's basically just what the writers need Optimus Prime's immediate predecessor to be. Which does make it interesting to see just how many different ways they've interpreted that and how many different ways they've taken it. So we're going to take a look at all of the Sentinels over the years, now that we have a new one. If I'm going to examine the new one for Transformers 1, what I can glean from the trailer, and if you didn't want the trailer to avoid spoilers, skip through until you see G1 stuff on screen. But what we see is a horde of Viacons behind Sentinel while he is standing there waiting for the Quintesson ship to open up. And he doesn't seem to put up a whole lot of resistance to the Quintesson when he grabs him, nor do the guards fire, which tells me that this Sentinel is subservient to the Quintessons in the movie. Whatever is going on, it's their machination, and he is going with it, either because he's too scared of them or because this is just a way to keep everyone on the planet safe. Not entirely sure what the motivation is just yet, but with the lack of reaction from Sentinel to being grabbed and the lack from the troops behind him, it leads me to believe, yeah, this is how things were supposed to go. This is what the relationship with the Quintessons is. So it's going to be more, I don't know, subservient take on Sentinel Prime than we've seen. But that's just like what I'm gleaning from a trailer. I could be completely wrong about this. Who knows? But for now, we do have plenty that we can examine. Now, the earliest character dubbed Sentinel Prime actually got that name retroactively. We saw him in Five Faces of Darkness during Rodimus Prime's history lesson. This is actually a pretty important version of Sentinel, because this one is actually, in G1 canon, the Autobot leader who led them to their first real victory over the Decepticons and, managed to hold on to peace on Cybertron for centuries. He did this because he is the leader that basically brought transformation to Cybertronians. And yeah, that's actually kind of significant. He's also the first victim of Megatron. Freshly after the assembly line, Megatron immediately goes into battle with Sentinel Prime. Potentially gets a little bit weird and fuzzy because it's a flashback. Regardless, it's Megatron who kills Sentinel, restarting what would become, I believe, the third Cybertronian war according to the fiction. Regardless, I'm still shocked that this version of Sentinel does not have any kind of toy representation whatsoever. I think it's a cool design. I would really enjoy having a toy of this character. And given the fact that he has such a big history and big moment in the original G1 cartoon, kind of surprising. Kind of surprising there's no representation at all. Now remember, this is only a character that is retroactively Sentinel Prime. Later fiction gave him the name. Otherwise, he's just called U-Haul Robot in the script. No actual distinct name. But he does serve the same way that Sentinel Prime traditionally does. He is the immediate predecessor, as the immediate Matrix bearer before Optimus Prime. But from all accounts, he's a pretty good one. You know, he seems to be a pretty heroic one. You know, the Marvel UK comics also gave us just a brief snippet of a Sentinel Prime passing on the Matrix. This was pretty much all that really existed. Just the fact that he fell in battle and passed it to Optimus Prime. Remember, it's the creation Matrix in this fiction, not the Matrix of leadership. Little bit different. Either way, we kind of gloss over that take on Sentinel. It's not important to the Marvel comics or even the Marvel UK storyline. Just kind of happened, and we're just kind of including it in this list just for the sake of completion. And that's the same way I will mention the Dreamwave version of Sentinel Prime, who also just barely exists, to the point where this is the only visual example I have. He really only exists in flashback to Megatron destroying him and killing him in battle. Fortunately, this Sentinel Prime was at least intelligent enough to remove the Matrix of leadership from him before he went into battle in order to protect it from Megatron. So, kind of knew going in he probably would not survive the battle. It's a forethought some other Sentinel Primes should have had going up against Megatron. But as we count, that's now two Sentinels that were killed by Megatron. We're not done with that, by the way. But what I'm mentioning here are basically minor Sentinel Primes. When I tell you the name Sentinel Prime, they're not really the ones you think of. No. We need to get into some of those, because those are some pretty significant ones. For instance, animated Sentinel Prime. We know him. He's a jerk. So, he exists to show you that there are shades of gray in the animated universe, the same way that there is a character like Lockdown who will play both sides of the field, whichever one is more profitable to him at the time, as well as characters that are morally gray, as it were, you know. That's basically what he is. He is egotistical, he is self-serving, and if we had gotten into later seasons, we, according to the plans that I have seen, according to what I know of like extended material for animated, we would have seen him willing to stoop to a lot of lows in order to gain authority. We saw him grabbing for authority when Ultra Magnus was wounded in battle. I believe if we had seen it continue, we would have gotten Sentinel Magnus for a season, which, if I remember right, might have even had like some Decepticon cooperation going on in order to achieve that. He was going to be a really scummy character that as he developed. I mean, he's scummy to begin with, right? Right? You know, he's self-serving and xenophobic. You know, he won't even touch an organic without disinfecting himself. Yeah, he's a jerk of a character, but he's not the it's one of the few times where Sentinel doesn't act as the predecessor of Optimus Prime. Instead, they were friends at one time until a mission went south and they lost Elita 1. Thinking she was dead, Sentinel blames Optimus for it happening, and the two go their separate ways, with Prime just kind of staying in middle management for the most part, and Sentinel moving up to the ranks to the Elite Guard. It's probably the one we think of the most when you think of Sentinel Prime, because the character does stand out so strongly, and he is a very unique element, you know, still Autobot aligned, but with a lot of mentality you would normally associate with a Decepticon. There's even some schemer in him that would associate you with Starscream. So he's a very different character. In a universe that's normally very bright and colorful with like big exaggerated characters, he's there to show you that it's not just like an all good or all bad thing. There are good guys who are bad people, and that is Sentinel Prime. And then we get into bad people who just pretend to be good guys. Dark of the Moon Sentinel Prime is probably probably the mainstream go-to for Sentinel Prime because, live action movie, it's always going to have more reach than the cartoons do. We know this one pretty well too. He sold out the Autobots in order to save Cybertron. He is a character who puts importance on salvaging and restoring Cybertron above all else, even above the other Autobots. Even above his own principles. This is the one who taught Optimus Prime freedom is the right of all sentient beings, and yet his plan involves enslaving another world in order to restore Cybertron, both in pillaging its resources and its people to act as repair maintenance for in order to basically slave labor to fix the planet. Now, this was a plan concocted with Megatron a long time ago. Never mind the fact that somehow all of this ended up happening on Earth with the Allspark and all that as well. That's just coincidence. But the character himself is, he's inherently evil. He's the first one on this list I would call like an actual evil character. He's also an idiot because he thinks that organic beings that are proportionally the size of ants to him would actually be able to repair a massive planet that is designed for giant metal beings. It's one of the dumbest plots I've ever heard. It's a way of endangering the whole planet, which works for a movie, but the second you give it even the slightest thought, you go, that is the dumbest idea. That is the dumbest idea you could have come up with. There's no way that is working. His plan to actually portal the planet into Earth, by the way, might have also resulted in a great amount of the damage and destruction that we saw on that Cybertron in later movies. Not really confirmed, because, of course, the movies can't keep its continuity straight for anything. But yeah, it's an idiot. The Sentinel Prime is an idiot. Having Spock as his voice is not helping the fact he's an idiot. But I digress. I mentioned evil. I mentioned that, yes, he is an evil character. Got nothing on IDW Sentinel Prime. Oh my god. So, this is one who came to power under the corrupt Autobot Senate that is like the prequel, like the backstory of the IDW 1.0 verse. The ones who instituted the whole thing of functionism, where like your alt mode is your lot in life. If you are like a tunneler, a tank, like a drill tank of some kind, you're a miner, period, and you don't get to be anything else. So he kind of came up in that caste system where he both hated authority, where he wanted authority for himself, but also hated authority telling him what to do and what he could or could not do. Corrupt. Oh boy. This is one of those type of leaders who gets people killed in order to keep things silent. That type of leader, right? So it is described in the comic as he took a bad Senate and made it worse. No, excuse me. Yeah, really bad example of an Autobot. But that's the story they were telling. See, sometimes the predecessor to Optimus Prime just needs to be a really heinous person in order to make Optimus Prime look all that much more heroic and to kind of like take Cybertron into these really dark periods so that Optimus Prime can rise up and bring it back into glory. That kind of thing. That's what they were going for in IDW. Sentinel Prime here is just a horrific person. That's not really known until after his death. So you see, after failing to capture the Decepticons at the time and failing to capture Megatron, he goes on a full assault to take out Megatron one last time, and this time in like full like heavy weapon regalia, like this super battle mode kind of thing. Probably gets killed by Megatron. Yeah, you don't try to one-on-one Megatron. It ain't gonna work. The irony here is that Sentinel Prime in this verse was ultimately viewed as a hero because of the way that he made a final stand against Megatron. It seemed like a heroic death. The problem was, it wasn't a death, because taking a little bit of inspiration from the current toy lines, this Sentinel Prime was a Titan Master. yeah, he had a bit of obsession with controlling and raising Titans, by the way. I should mention that at some point, that this guy also just viewed Titans as just gigantic weapons for his disposal. So yeah, the body was destroyed by Megatron and ultimately laid to rest. The missing head was viewed as a desecration by the Decepticons. No, the head detached into Infinitus and snuck away to rebuild a body, which took millions of years as he kept sliding in and out of consciousness. But when the body is restored and when he is actually ready to try to take Cybertron again, he has come to find out that Autobots and Decepticons are like openly fraternizing now. They're actually like living as a society of some kind under the authority of Starscream. This did not sit well. He is one of those xenophobic zealot types who just views any Decepticon as bad, and any Autobot who actually cooperates and actually associates with Decepticons also bad. He sees this modern Cybertron as something that has to be cleansed. And by cleansed, I mean open space bridges and tunnel in like zombified Titans that he has reawakened. Things that are going to wipe the planet of all life. That kind of thing. He has stopped. He has stopped and dies unceremoniously, dropped into the engine of a moon. It is as evil as a Sentinel ever gets. I mean, this really did act as just a really big antagonist. And of course, IDW really kind of prided itself on not only like putting heavy use on characters that otherwise the fiction didn't really touch before, but also putting these kinds of spins on things where there's a lot of moral gray area, where I would argue like even Optimus Prime is not a fully like on the full white end of the spectrum. Megatron isn't on the full black end of the spectrum. They're in the gray area somewhere in the middle. It's very hard to find like the pure like it's hard to find. It's hard to find the far sides, like the renegade and like the paladin type. Paragon. You can't find that in IDW very often. And Sentinel is a very big example of renegade. Not the only time. So IDW also tried Sentinel again in 2.0. Now, the weird thing about 2.0 is a lot of the weird mistakes and choices they made in 1.0 got corrected. Starsaber actually shows up as a very, very deserving hero in IDW 2.0, completely opposed to whatever they did with him in 1.0. And Sentinel Prime kind of gets a similar treatment. So he is not actually a character that is like has some kind of grand scheme going. Now, I'm not saying he's purely good, because he is not above like bribery or scheming in order to keep things down low or keep people on his side. But ultimately, he's a far better leader than the original one was depicted as. And his Cybertron, while problematic, is certainly better than the 1.0 led over. It was designed because at the time in IDW 2.0 in this storyline, it was a peaceful time where what would eventually become the Decepticons were just starting to rise up. So you instead kind of have a Sentinel who kind of seemed to know what he was doing. The wording I would phrase it is as maybe not maybe not like inherently self-serving or evil in choice, but questionable. Ultimately good, but questionable. I think that's the best way to look at 2.0 Sentinel Prime. Ironically, this one is, instead of being just inspired by, this one is directly copied from his Titan's Return design, but this one is not a Titan Master. When he dies to the Rainmakers, he just dies. He tries to leave the Matrix to Ultra Magnus, by the way. The Matrix said, nope, I like this red and blue one better. I'm gonna go in him. So that's Sentinel Prime in IDW. There's another one that we can focus on just for a little bit. This one doesn't have as much fiction, but I want to point it out, and that would be from the Aligned Continuity. Now, this one is weird because different fictions refer to the same character as Zeta Prime and Sentinel Prime. So apparently, according to Hasbro, the full name is Sentinel Zeta Prime. That's not confusing in the least. But as you can see, there's another design of him that's far closer to animated Sentinel Prime in design. This one is, kind of a blend of various different ones. But we're back to Blue Sentinels. And this one is, again, not necessarily a bad leader, but it's a leader who faced really hard choices. What weighed on this character as a leader was it was the Cosmic Rust Plague that forced him to, in order to preserve Cybertron, forced him to detonate the space bridges leading back to the planet, which meant the colony worlds that those space bridges connected to were left to suffer from the plague. And it's a decision that weighed on this Sentinel Prime throughout basically his entire fictional existence. He is another character who dies horribly to a Megatron. Literally arms sliced off and strung to a pole, essentially. Again, he's not really a huge note in the story. He is just kind of there to just be what needs to be for the story. A previous leader that kept things together, and then Megatron caused everything to fall apart. So you're trying to take up his mantle and his direction. So again, not necessarily a bad Sentinel Prime, There is one more to mention just so we can get every version of Sentinel in this list. I'm sure there's a couple of little versions here and there that I'm skipping out on, but we're going to finish off with the fact that in the Machinima series, I know, we don't want to think about it. The Mistress of Flame actually started praying to the Primes in that series and actually mentioned Sentinel as a Prime known for his wisdom. I'm only pointing this out because this is the only instance and the only iteration of any Transformer fiction that actually refers to Sentinel Prime as one of the 13. Which just screams of writing mistake. Of just like, here's a list of Prime names. Wait, you weren't supposed to use that one. Oh well, too late. It really shows you just how much care and love went into that series, don't you think? But with that, I'm going to close it off there. That's just about every version of Sentinel that we've gotten. I still prefer this guy. Where's my toy Hasbro? He's a cool look. Way overdue. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If Lancer and Greenlight can get toys with no real place and no real significance to the fiction and no speaking lines in their one episode, why not him? Why not Sentinel? Oh well, my personal demands that are never met. But that is your list for the day. That is your history lesson. So, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.